Well, the subject for today is what is capitalism and what is socialism? Well, first of all, of course, we're not allowed to say capitalism anymore. You're not supposed to say that word. You're supposed to talk about the free market economy. You know, of course, that's nonsense. It reminds me of a phrase from Shakespeare who said, "A rose by any other name will smell as sweet, and capitalism with any other name will smell as bad." Now, capitalism is a form of class society. It's a form of exploitation, but it is a specific form of exploitation. If you look at history, there have been many different forms of exploitation. For example, slave society in ancient Rome, or feudalism in the Middle Ages. They were specific forms of exploitation, but they're not capitalism. Capitalism is a specific form of exploitation based on money economy, industry, private ownership of the banks, trade, and things, and the production of commodities. Now, the first thing to observe is that many people believe that capitalism has always existed. People really do believe this. People believe that society doesn't change. It's a very deep-seated, I won't say it's an idea, you can't grace it with it, it's not really an idea, it's really a prejudice, but many people hold this prejudice. That you can't change society, there's always been rich and poor, there's always been money, some people with money, some people without, and so on. So deep is this prejudice, it's even reflected in popular culture. For example, a few years ago, this is probably shows my age, there was a film called The Flintstones. You ever seen The Flintstones? Yeah, no? Yeah, you know? On the television, and then there was a film. Now this is interesting. Here is a program or a film about human society as it was supposed to have existed, I don't know when, 1,000,000 years ago or whenever. And the interesting thing is that there's rich and poor, there's money, there's prisons, there's police, there's the army, there's banks, there's workers and capitalists, and so there's the bourgeois family, in which the man is oppressed by the woman. In other words, just like today. It's the same. People believe this. Now, of course, I'm aware of the fact that this is meant to be a joke. This is meant to be funny. Yes, but people still believe this, you know. People believe that money has always existed, it's always been the state. And of course, this is absolutely false. As a matter of fact, if you to look at history, if you to present the whole of human history as a clock, say, of 24 hours, for the overwhelming majority of the time that our species has been on this planet, which would be how long? How long would you say? There's different dates, approximately 100,000 years, about. For the big majority of this period, there was no money, no private property, no state, no rich and poor, no exploitation, no family as we know it today. Now, there are still some tribes, of course not many of them are left now, but still, if you go deep enough into the Amazon jungle, where David is from that part, if you go deep enough, you will find tribes that are still living in the Stone Age, whose way of life has not significantly changed for thousands and thousands of years. These tribes do not know what money is, they don't use money, they have no private property, there is no state, there is no police, there are no prisons, there are no laws, there is no organized religion. And of course, they get along fine. I mean, I don't wish to glorify this way of life because it must be pretty hard. But nevertheless, they survive okay without any of these things. And the point that I want to make to you, the first point, is that for the majority of the time that we have lived on this planet, we have been communists. We have lived under a system of communism in which private property didn't exist. Now, all of this changed approximately 10 or 12,000 years ago, which is known as the Neolithic Revolution, which is the transition from the hunter-gathering society to settled agriculture. Here you find the beginnings of private property, only 10,000 years ago. Therefore, if you think of our history as a clock of 24 hours, class society and the exploitation of man by man has only existed for about the last 5 minutes, less, 3 minutes, more like. Class society begins in the Neolithic period with agriculture, where a surplus was produced. Lasted for quite some time, and then you get the beginning of slavery, slave society, like in ancient Greece and ancient Rome, which again lasted for. Now, slavery is a specific form of exploitation in which human beings are bought and sold. Okay, and the slaves produce all the work. This is forced labor. The slave has got no rights. The slave is just treated as a thing, as an object. In fact, the Latin word for a slave was instrumentum vocale, which means a tool with a voice. That's all the slaves were considered, not human beings. They were tools that could speak. And slave society lasted for quite some time, a few hundred years, before it entered into crisis. Now, what you will find, if you look at history, is that different forms of society are not eternal. They don't last forever. They are born, they develop, they thrive, then they reach a peak in which they enter into decline and collapse. We've seen this many times. You saw the slave society. The Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire is the famous book by Edward Gibbon, which was written in the 18th century. Slave society reaches its limits, that it can't develop any further. And if you look at the secret of this, if you want us to understand the secret of it, it is this. Marx and Engels explained this. That in the last analysis, the viability of any socio-economic system is determined by its ability to develop the means of production. And that's absolutely correct. By the way, Marx did not say that you could reduce everything to economics. We often hear this caricature. Never said any such nonsense. What he did say, and I repeat, in the last analysis, you can judge the success or failure, if you like, the viability of any specific socio-economic system by its ability to develop the productive forces. That must be the case. That is to say, its ability to develop industry, agriculture, technology, its ability to put food on the table, to feed people. Capitalism, by the way, is no longer able to do that. You see, they can't even feed people anymore. Its ability to feed people, to provide houses, to put clothes on your back, to have education for the children, provision for sickness, other things, basic human necessities, ultimately must depend on the development of the productive forces. Slave society collapsed with the collapse of the Roman Empire, and then you had a long period again of about, how long? About 1,000 years? Well, no, a few hundred years, not 1,000 years, less than 1,000 years, of a different form of class society, which is feudalism. Feudalism is based on agriculture, agricultural production, in which you get the feudal aristocracy at the top, the king at the top of the pyramid, then the soldiers, the priests. The church was an important landowner. And at the bottom of the pile you have not slaves, there are no slaves, or there are few slaves under feudalism, but serfs, who formally are supposed to be free, but in fact they're tied to the land. They can't move, they really speaking are enslaved in a sense to the feudal masters. This society lasted for quite some time until eventually it was overthrown by a new form of exploitation, which is capitalism. Capitalism begins in the late Middle Ages, in Italy actually, northern Italy, then Holland, then England. England was perhaps the main country that developed capitalism in the early stages. And it's not the same form. It is exploitation still. There's still a minority of rich people who control our lives, but it's different. It's based upon a money economy.